You're listening to NFT365, the first daily podcast on NFTs with your host, Fanzo.
So when I first started off in my own NFT journey, you guys were here with us. We were stumbling through the lingo. I couldn't even pronounce half the words. And I started getting on Twitter. And there was a Twitter space hosted by today's guest. You guys know him, the host of NFT365, Brian Fanzo. And when I jumped into his space, I was instantly relieved because I wasn't met with some techie guru who was talking over my head. He was talking to us as human beings. And I said, oh, if this is the NFT space, I feel right at home here. We're going to dig into the bridge between technology and humanity. And I think we have the perfect guest to lead this conversation. Brian, thanks so much for jumping on today.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I thank you for the kind words. And I remember some of those Twitter spaces where you jumped in and I think, seeing those that are supporting and coming back and then all of us kind of creating, to me, it's just been part of the fun of this whole wild journey of NFTs. So thanks for having me.
Well, unlike us, Brian, you are techie. You might not come across techie at first when you talk to you because you talk like a human being, but can you give us a little bit of background of what you were doing prior to NFTs?
Yeah. So I like to say like my skill set I figured out, which, I didn't go to school for this because it wasn't a job, is like I translate the geek speak is more intentionally like what my job. And it's the job I actually had in every job I've ever had. I went to school for like computer science, ended up like, majoring in business information systems. And I worked for the US government in cybersecurity for 9 years. So I was able to take kind of like an entry-level help desk job, seize an opportunity to start teaching cybersecurity. And this is 2004. And like, there wasn't even like cybersecurity wasn't something I could take in college. It wasn't even an option for me when I graduated in 2003. And so I quickly like leaned into teaching active duty military cybersecurity courses. And over those 9 years, I ended up growing in a massive team, 32 direct reports. We traveled around the world, really teaching two things. It was implementing cybersecurity, but also collaboration using SharePoint, which anyone who uses Microsoft SharePoint is a very painful solution to deploy.
And in the military, hanging on the SharePoint.
Yeah.
I can't even, man.
Oh, it was and like we were the ones that had to like go in and like, okay, you have to stop sharing this way. You have to use SharePoint, and I need the Army to share with the Navy. I need the Marine Corps to share. And like, I always say like I had one of the hardest collaboration jobs ever because I would go into Joint Chiefs of Staff and say, why is the Army not sharing your policy with the Navy? We're all in the same cybersecurity battle. Like, knowing underlying that this was like a bigger, a bigger thing where it's like, how do you get these groups to share? And, I loved the job. It was a great job for me. And then I decided I got to a point where I was either going to stay in that role for the rest of my life. And I was a little bit scared of being complacent. To be honest, I know myself now that like I get to a spot where I love the building. I love the ramp up. But when I get to the top, I have like that tendency like, okay, am I going to get like, complacent, just lazy? And so I left my security clearance. I had the highest TSSC, highest civilian clearance you could get, and went and worked, as a technology evangelist was the title. And it was really my dream job. I saw Guy Kawasaki for Apple. He had the job title was technology evangelist for Steve Jobs. And I was like, oh, you don't have to market, you don't have to sell, you don't have like KPIs or like quotas, but yet you get to help people leverage tech that makes sense. And I was like, I want a job to have that. I didn't know like how I was going to find a job. Thankfully, I found a startup out of Arizona that hired me, and I ended up working there for 2 years and 10 days. And it was my first like foray into marketing because I had the marketing department underneath me because I reported to the CEO and had a dotted line to the CIO and a dotted line to the CMO. And so I had this really unique role. And I'm telling you, the startup I worked for, we were hiring 12 new hires a week. And it was like the typical, like you've heard, like we had like ping pong tables, free lunch Fridays. Like it was like that. It was like the things you see on TV, and it was like, we were rapid growth. And then they got bought. And the day that they got bought, CenturyLink, the parent company, they came into my office and said, I don't know what the hell it is you do, how you've kept this job, why your face is on the front of the building, but we can't figure out what your job is. And so today's your last day. And like literally, and when I say face in the front of the building, on the side of the building, like almost 2 stories high, was like a picture of me pointing like this, like coming in the building, because I became kind of the face of that brand. And I like to say that was the start of my entrepreneur journey. Was that day they got bought, and they kind of and I had just we had just found out we were pregnant with our second daughter. I now have three. I have three daughters. Yeah, talking about like a whirlwind. And I was blessed. I will say, the CEO who had sold the company came into me and he's like, "Hey, I got you." A week later, he's like, "I have two startups. You can advise them. I will pay you the exact same salary that you were making in the company for 4 months to get your feet wet." So I had like the most beautiful golden parachute into entrepreneurship, because most people don't have what I kind of lucked into. And that was kind of when, like right at that time, was what I was getting defined as like a social media influencer in the tech space. And so I had gone, done some work with IBM and Dell, and I got awarded this, and I always laugh at like vanity awards and things, but I got awarded top 25 social business leaders of the future by The Economist. And I don't even know, like, I was like, how does that come in? Like my CEO came into my desk and he's like, "What is this thing that you won?" And I was like, and it's like, and like in big bold letters, it said influencer. And I remember like Googling like influence, like what is an influencer?
I won a pie eating contest once. First place.
Hey, I didn't win any. I tried 2 eating contests. I didn't win either time. But yeah, so like I won that award, and that award actually, weirdly enough, it allowed me to go to TED Talks and attend 16 IBM events on behalf of this award. So it was like us, and it was like some of the biggest names in social media marketing that worked for brands, like Scott Monty, who like redefined Ford Motor Company's social media. And that's when it kind of clicked that like my job in the government was translating the geek speak. I spoke on behalf of like, how do we get people to collaborate? And I helped them, teach them the tech. And then I did this in the data center company. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to speak full time. I didn't really know if that was a full-time gig. And as of 2017, I've done, 60 events a year every year since, as a kind of an entrepreneur, and launched a couple of podcasts along the way. But that's kind of how I got here. I'm definitely tech savvy, but I will say like I found my niche in between. Like I can speak management and then translate it to the geeks. I can speak geek and then translate that to management. And little did I know I've been doing that my whole life. And now I just kind of get paid to do that on stages and behind microphones.
Shout out to CenturyLink. That gangster move, firing your boy and setting him on another path. That is probably extremely fulfilling. And by the way, you said you have 3 daughters? Dude, she's got 2. I got 2. We're all girl parents. This keeps happening, Heather. It's strange. We're like, we got to start a club or something. Awesome intro, Heather. Go ahead. I know you're on the edge of your seat. You got something.
So we're not techie. I know everybody listening to this show is just mind blown that we're not the techie people. We're learning and really learning some of this lingo for me, at least personally, for the very first time. Like even, financial literacy and all that. I feel like I've been learning a lot about that, exploring NFTs, and just it's endless. We're newbies through and through. I think my entry concern, and it's lasted the whole 6 months I've been in the space, is just how does this translate into just like our everyday human lives? Because I think when we start thinking about the world becoming more digital, my mind automatically goes towards transactional. And I'm a previous therapist, Brian. Okay. So I come from a completely different world. I'm all up in my feelings, people. That's like the number one thing that I think about all the time. I'm not data driven. I'm not about numbers. It turns me off. But I know we have to figure this out in order to improve our future. We can't run from it. We can't be like, oh, tech is going to ruin us. F it. Because whether we like it or not, Janet, it's here to stay. How can we as leaders make sure we usher in this next wave of decentralization, Web3, et cetera, in a more human way? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you are leading naturally in that way. And I know that, front and center on your website, you said you're focused on the harmony between technology and humanity. First of all, that was big. But first of all, tell me where the humanity part came in for you personally, because you are a tech dude first and foremost.
So I am, but I never fit in like the tech circle in a weird way. Like I've been very blessed. Like my parents were very, raising me, like empowering me to be like kind of walk my own way. And looking back now, I can say like in college, I played college hockey. I was a president of my fraternity, and I was a computer science major. But like nobody that was a computer science major played hockey. Nobody that played hockey was in a fraternity, right? And I was like that person that kind of like brought these worlds together. And little did I know, like you could go back to high school, and like high school, I was like a thespian, but I was also on the baseball team, and I also like DJ'd at a local skating rink, and like I was never really afraid to kind of play in those different areas. But interesting enough for me, like when I got into like my career, I was like, I don't like to sit behind a computer. Like I like to be on stage teaching. I like to be able to, have these conversations, but I also really don't love direct management roles. And like marketing felt like sales enablement, which I was like, I don't really want to do that. And so like along that way was like, where do I fit in this like technology world? And I will say like throughout like that period, I also struggled with, through school, I was not a great student. Like I struggled massively through school. And throughout that time, I kind of always knew like I had to find my own path. And when I was 31, so 9 years ago now, I'm 40 now, 9 years ago, and, one day changed my life. And it was the day I got diagnosed ADHD. And I walked into the doctor's office. I kind of knew my youngest brother had been diagnosed 2 years earlier, but I was like the anti-medicine guy. I grew up, in my family. We didn't talk about, medicine. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about any of those things. But I was at this point where I was struggling because I was having massive success in my business. We had 2 kids, I had a nice house, but I struggled with always feeling like I was broken, like as a whole, because I couldn't do like the basics that everyone else was doing. They're like, Brian, like just do that. And I'm like, you realize I want to do it, but I can't. And I could never really verbalize that. And so that day, I mean, I know where my Jeep was. I know the clothes I wear. I got diagnosed, and it was the day that I went from feeling broken to just being reminded I'm different. And that like clicked for me on like being diagnosed ADHD. And it was about a year after that, it was on like an interview, like I was getting asked questions on a stage, and someone asked me a question about like, you talk with your hands and you talk fast, but like, we really love what you're doing. Like, what is your superpower? And I replied, ADHD is my superpower. And I remember like the whole audience going like, did he just say that? Like he just said that in front of I know it was like a couple hundred people. It wasn't like, and I was like, and I leaned into a little bit and was like, well, I was diagnosed ADHD, but now looking back, I realized this parts of who I am, the way my brain works, is that I'm just different. And I've always been okay with being different, but I didn't realize my brain was wired differently. And like, that was a big piece for me. And when I like started to like kind of dive into that, because people would start asking questions, and it was funny, the very next keynote I gave, I mentioned ADHD again, and I had 60 people in a line like afterwards waiting to talk. All 60 of them only asked about ADHD. Like, no, I felt like really bad because I was like, I spent all this time talking about this. I was a really bad. The talk was how to migrate into cloud computing, like as boring as you could get. But the ADHD conversation was what was kind of set forth. And so for me, the whole, like, what I kind of recognized was in my career, like when I had my dream job, technology evangelist, I actually got like, when I had my 1 year anniversary, they were like, Brian, we're giving you a new job title. And they had like this big rollout, and they changed my title from tech evangelist to change evangelist. And I was like, well, why is that? And they're like, we get feedback from all of our, our clients, all of our people, that you actually help us use less tech, not more tech. And I was like, well, it's true, because I don't like tech for technology's sake. I never believe technology solves people problems. I believe people solve people problems, and technology kind of helps us. And that was kind of like that, like, oh, wait a second. And I will say the more I leaned into like, hey, this is my ADHD, or hey, I'm a proud girl dad. And I'm also a very emotional person. I've always been emotional my entire life. Like, I say this, like I struggle with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which it's been every minute of my life. I didn't realize it was a thing until being diagnosed. But like, I was the kid that was like, I was the captain of our hockey team on the third line. So I was not the most talented player, but I was a leader in the team, but I also could see the ice. But I was the kid that like the coach would yell at me and I would just start crying. Since I could ever remember, I didn't handle that very well. But like for me, I would cry, compartmentalize it, get on the ice, do what I need to do, or play sports. And now the funny part about that, like all looking back, was like, that was just my way of like of like compartmentalizing it, of being able to take it in, where I know so many others kind of don't have that outlet and aren't comfortable. Like I was, the crybaby on the ice or in the locker room, but eventually it was like something I just became like, I owned. Like, hey, I'm an emotional guy. Like I cry watching Undercover Boss on TV. Like my daughters laugh. Like we watch American Ninja Warrior and there's like a backstory of a kid and they like look over at me and there's like tears in my eye. They're like, I'm very like sentimental. Right. And so to me, like it was like an aha moment of, wait a second, like I've never been just a tech futurist, and I don't consider myself like an expert in like the mental health or humanity side, but like that harmony between the two is where I feel like my sweet spot is, where I can help you say like, I'm going to try all this tech and I'll tell you what to try to use and then what things you should just ignore. Right. And I'm big into, like, most people would assume like, Brian, you're a big gamer. Brian, you do all the, like, there's all these assumptions. I'm like, actually, no, you'd be surprised at like where my kind of background is. Cause I look at it as, how can I help? And like my North Star has always been, for whatever reason, I'm not sure even looking back, but I've always believed that we should feel less alone in a digitally connected world, not more alone. And in a weird way, we've gone the other way on that. And I feel like that's like kind of my soapbox. Like that's what gets me up every morning is like, how can I help us leverage the technology that's out there so that we have opportunities to feel less alone, like across the board. So I'm not a mental health expert in any way, but I love that space, being able to be an advocate and ally. And I have a coin, a creator coin. It's the ADHD coin, and it was a no brainer for me when they let me pick a name. It had to be 3 to 5 characters. I was like, if I have an ADHD creator coin, every interview, every conversation, they're going to have to ask me about that coin, which gives me an opportunity to talk about my ADHD, which then kind of helps to remove that bias and stigma. So yeah, that's the very long-winded answer of kind of how that worked.
Okay. So, the interesting thing about ADHD, and I'm not interested in getting tested because I feel like just self-diagnosed. I also think a lot of people self-diagnose themselves, but I am everywhere. But I was listening to a podcast once of an entrepreneur. He's very high up there, and I believe what he says to be very true. But he says the thing about people with ADHD is they have intense periods of deep focus, which is exactly why your business was thriving, right? But if you're doing some shit that you don't want to do, like, forget it. I know exactly what that's like, and Heather's seen it and I've seen it in her. Like, we're like, sometimes we are just deep, and like it's like you're in your own little bubble, and that's actually is a superpower. So I completely agree with you. But to go a little bit further on the other aspect of it, in terms of and I will not comment for both of us because I know Heather's probably got plenty to say as far as the deepening of the connections or interactions that tech can bring. It's like, hypothetically, it should, right? Like, you could say about your Discord community and ours, like, yeah, dude, but more people are talking than if we hadn't had this tech available. But at the same time, and I will use myself as an example, I am happy to do less interacting like this a lot of the time. For whatever reason, I'm now conditioned that way, to instead write my thoughts on LinkedIn, to instead make an Instagram reel, to instead write something funny, or make something funny for TikTok. And that is almost like, it's like an outward expression. And in my opinion, it's like, I do feel like I'm kind of interacting, and, it's okay. But at the same time, like, Heather and I were just in LA, and it was great to actually be in person with another creator and blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's like, there's this really, really strange dichotomy, and I'm not sure if Web3 is going to be able to improve on it or not, especially with so much of the anonymity, which is a completely different subject, but a lot of the anonymity a lot of people like to use, which is, I don't have an opinion on that, but there's a lot of times I'm completely comfortable, and I there's a lot of people I think like me who are okay with these relationships that are virtual, and actually prefer to be like, I don't want to upset the balance and do some in real life shit, where we're going to do some meetup in this city with our community, and then all of a sudden I'm turned off, or I'm overwhelmed, or there's too many questions, or too many people's names I'm going to forget. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it's strange for me. I don't have an opinion on what's right and what's wrong, but I do know that I do lean on some of the capacity for virtual relationships to actually mean something to me and satiate me, more than I used to. And that's my take, not a take, but I just wanted to layer on top of what you said and then kick this thing to Heather.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw in just real quick on that. I think, one of the things I think to think about too on, like, I like to, it's so true. Like, I don't have a problem hyper focusing. I have a problem regulating my focus. Right. And like, that's the ADHD side of me. I am medicated. So I take Adderall, and I think for everyone has to figure out their own version of it. I found a way that I've actually been on the same amount of Adderall for now 6 years, which is something I take pride in, because my youngest brother, who was diagnosed before me, was on Adderall, and he got so out of control that his personality changed. And his wife kind of gave him the ultimatum of, Adderall or me. And he's been off of it now for almost 5 years. And the kind of beauty of that is it opened my mind. And so I do and it's nothing scientific, and everybody has to do their own advice, but I do a drug holiday every week where I take one day of the week where I don't do any of my medicine. And that day is tough. Like, that, it was yesterday. And it's a day that I struggle with everything. Like, I feel like I live in a little bit of a cloud. My daughters will joke. They'll know, like, oh, daddy, is today drug holiday? Like, they can like feel it like in my body, but it's kind of allowed me to do that. But I think the other part of that is, one of the other things that I found when I got diagnosed, and the more I've leaned into like this me, was I had to give myself permission and grace that I do things differently, like create, like interact, like communicate, right? Like, and like, I had to forgive myself. Like, I'm the person that I always tell people that if you text me and I don't text you back, it's because what you texted me was so good that I wanted to take time to get back to it. And I wanted to give you like a full answer. But the way my brain works is I don't stack tasks. So it just kind of fell off. And so for people that like, so like we have like my slang is like, I call it permission to nudge. And everyone I know, I always tell them, my clients, I'm like, nudge me. Like, you just need to nudge me, because like I will forget to reply. But for me, like, so much of my life was like, Brian, just reply these messages, or Brian, just do the dishes. And I would say like the most extreme is like, doing mundane tasks is something I struggle with massively.
I just got to ask one question real quick. Do you have an iPhone?
Oh, yes.
Same here. It's like someone's got to talk to Apple about being able to mark a text unread. You know what I'm saying? The same way you could do with an email. Like, so what I do, just as a hack for you, if a client or someone texts me, I'll pin it at the top. And I'll do that. I'll be like, oh, I definitely got to get back to Meta or whatever. But those stack up too, and then I forget. So it's like I'm just someone needs to make an unread option on that shit.
Yeah, because like as soon as we have like the starred or read later on email, I just have a whole lot. Like, that pile just gets ridiculous, right? It's like, what in the world? But like, I would like the thing that's like probably the most kind of puts it out there is like there's a sticky note on my door in my master bedroom that says, "Brush your teeth, Brian." And it's that serious that I will just forget. Like, I would like brushing I should be, I've probably been doing it 39 years, that it should be like a pretty usual task. For me, that task, it just never comes up as a priority. It never is something I care about. It's never, and I know ADHD comes in like all these different shades. And I will say my middle daughter was diagnosed with the same with me, ADHD, dyslexia. And I wasn't diagnosed till 31. And so now I get to see it through a dad's eyes of like what I know I went through. And now my 9-year-old, who just turned 10, is going through it. And now I get like a whole, I get like a refresh on life, because like we sit down with her teachers and we go through everything and say, when she does this, it's not because she doesn't care. They're like, yeah, but every other, I'm like, I know. And I was told that my entire life, like, why can't you do what every other kid's doing? But then like, so for me, it's like, I get this like a double down on it. But I mean, ultimately, that's where I think this harmony is, right? Where it's not telling you have to be active on Discord or you have to take every relationship offline. It's like, hey, find what works best for you and like design that around you. And that's okay. And I think technology allows us to design some of these things. Like, if Apple would let us show an unread text message, come on, basics now. Of course, they made us wait 4 years for copy paste. So like, it's probably not a big deal there. But I mean, I'm sure as a therapist, I'm sure, Heather, that a lot of that is things that have rung true for a longest time. And I mean, mental health was not talked about in my house. Medicine was not talked about in my house. Even to this day, my dad will send me every messages every once in a while. He's like, do you feel like you have to integrate your ADHD into every conversation? And I'm like, well, Dad, you believe that it's part of who I am, and I'm one that shows up who I am. That's kind of how I work. And so, it's still a learning curve, that's for sure.
All right. So I have kind of a 2-part question. It's the same thing, but when I think about being a better human online, right? And then I also try to think about being a better human physically in the real world. I think some of the same issues come up for me when we think about tech, because being a better human online, there's so much dissonance at times where like we see numbers on an analytics sheet or something and we forget those are human beings. And sometimes it's just like there's like this lost thing there with, again, the transactional bit of tech versus like these are stinking humans. And that's what we've got to figure out as leaders right now, how to bring those two together where we can start interacting on a more human level. I'd love your thoughts on that. I know that you've said that opening up about your story has been one way that you've led and been more human online. Do you have anything that you would add to that? And then I'll add my second question to it.
Yeah, I mean, a big switch for me happened on November 2nd, 2013. I know the date because I've shared the story before, but it was a day actually, November 2nd, 2013. My mom had reached out to me, and I was, I just separated in my marriage, and she had said, Brian, like, I don't see, like, why don't you have your hat on in your social media photos? Like, you're claiming that you're like being yourself, but like, where's your hat? And I remember being like, Mom, you don't know social media. Don't you worry. She's like, I just know that the thing that you've always done was be committed to being yourself, and you've never apologized for it. She's like, but it kind of felt like you almost are. And I hung up that phone with my mom that day, and I was like, oh man, she was right. Because I had spent, like, I was burnt out. I thought social media was annoying. I would spend like 45 minutes on a perfect text because grammar I struggle with, combination of dyslexia and ADHD, and like I have fat fingers. So like typing, I fat finger a lot of things. I just go back. And it was like that moment that I was like, oh my God, I've been trying to post online what I thought others wanted to hear versus being myself online and like letting people decide on their own. Right. And that day, like I went and I took a Sharpie and went on my bathroom mirror and I wrote "Be Yourself" in giant letters. And it's actually the tattoo I'm getting in a week on my arm, which I'm very excited about getting, and been designed. And it actually has like a through line with my daughters. We have a lot of talks around like the concept of be yourself and transparency. But that day switched, because that day I went from trying to like broadcast what I thought people wanted to giving people access to who I am and kind of letting that kind of go. So you'll notice, like, I don't, like, for me, it's like, this is my day-to-day life. Like, here's your window in. And I always tell people, like, transparency doesn't guarantee trust, right? There's a lot of really bad people that they're transparent. We just determine they're transparent, right? Transparency gives people a window in to determine if you're trustworthy faster, right? So you can say, hey, I trust them because they're being more transparent. And so for me, like, in many ways, I'm uncomfortably transparent for some people, which I know also happens to be an ADHD, trait of, especially those of us late diagnosed, we overshare. But like, I own that. Like, even in my dating life now, like I own, like, I'm like, here's what I'm about. My 3 daughters are my first 3 things in my life. You can't be okay being number 4th in my life. You can't handle it, right? This is how I operate. This is like, and I'm very like upfront, but I will say that's helped me a lot. And I will say the flip of that is, it also is invoked haters, right? There's lots of people like my clients, like, this is how transparent we are with my clients. Like, my clients know at 2:40 p.m. every single day is when my alarm goes off for my Adderall, my second dose of Adderall. My clients know it. So like they'll hear, oh, Brian, it's Adderall time. That's how transparent I am, because I was like, I don't want them to think my lack of replying to an email, like, because I used to get this all the time. Brian, you're tweeting, but you haven't replied to my email. And it's like, well, the way that my creativity works and the way that my brain works, like, you have to understand, and like, it's very hard for like that neurodiverse conversation. And so for me, that's been a big one. And then the second thing I'll just add to that is, I have a philosophy. It actually started with my days at SharePoint with the government, was they would come in and say, Brian, what is your team doing? Like, I don't know any of them are doing anything of value for our clients. And I was like, so I went and told my team, I was like, I want you to screenshot everything awesome that is ever sent to us. And I want you to put it in this folder. It's a group folder. And every month when my boss would come in and be like, what is your team doing? I just open this folder. And it came into this, like, I call it screenshot awesomeness. And I do it every day, all day. Like, when I get a nice tweet or an email or a comment, and I mean, there's lots of them with both of us, right? There's people that tweeted yesterday that said, hey, my favorite 2 podcasts together. I can't wait to do it. I screenshot it. I put it on my desktop on my computer. The days I'm feeling down, the days I'm questioning why I'm doing this, the day I'm like, am I making an impact? I just open that folder, because that folder is like, I mean, I don't have to, and it's so much so I have a folder for every month for the last 8 years, which is kind of cool in like a way of like, every nice thing, every random comment, because we quickly forget the good things, right? We'll look at a vanity metric, and then we'll get a hater, or we'll get like a bad comment, and then that we'll spend an hour and a half on that. We'll have 100 people that say we are amazing. We'll spend 1 minute on the 100, and we'll spend an hour and a half on that one. Like we'll go into their profile, like, why do they hate us? What are they all about? Right. And like, that's part of like our human condition. And so for me, that screenshot awesomeness and like giving myself like forgiveness for not operating the way everyone else operates. Like you pay 25% more for me to do a keynote opening of your event. I hate mornings. I am a night person. Mornings, I just despise mornings. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make you, if you want me to be your opening keynote, 25% more. And I remember my speaker agent, she was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just telling you, it takes me that much more to do that. And when I started putting that out there to people, it was amazing how well received that was, because I owned why I was doing that. And like that to me has been part of the bigger lesson here, is like giving people access, but also kind of owning some of my nuances that might, kind of before I would have been ashamed for.
I know we're way over. I'm sorry. I just want to highlight this too. We just talked about being a better human online, transparency, really understanding all the good outweighs some of the negative, reminding yourself out. You mentioned a lot of really good stuff there, but I wanted to ask you too about being a better human offline, because as content creators and leaders and people who are passionate about this space, I hate admitting this, but it's the truth. I struggle so hard being present in my family's life because I have so much guilt for turning things off. Like, oh, I should be in a Twitter space right now, or I should be creating a reel, or I should be doing this or that it's actually been really hard for me to be present as a wife and a mother, because being so integrated in the digital landscape, it's hard for me to turn it off. And my husband will be like, yo, right here, what's going on? I'm just like staring off into space. And so that's one thing that I've just been concerned about, me personally, and also too, as we advance into this world, how do you turn it off for you and sit down with your little girls and not feel bad about not being on a effing Twitter space,
And because there's always something, right? There's always a post. There's always something we could be. So first of all, I applaud your transparency and authenticity there. You're not alone at all. I struggle with it in the sense of I'm very hyper aware of it. I'm so much so I'll share, like, one of the things I had to figure out was I started buying extra devices that I monitor. The notifications on the devices are different on every device. So whenever I'm like, you know what, I need to spend time with my kids, but I need to be aware if there's a fire, if there's something with my team, something needs me, I leave my phone, I turn it into airplane mode, I grab my iPad mini, and my iPad mini has only certain notifications on there that are worth disrupting my life.
I've heard this before, and it's the people who told me about this, I thought they were nuts, but they're like, it's incredibly effective.
Well, the problem for me was, if you tell me to unplug, replugging in is a nightmare, because I've missed all of that stuff. Like I refuse to unplug, because it's like, no, thank you. Like, you are making my life for the next week hell if I unplug for one day. And so I was like, and this comes back to the security world. I hate like all or nothing solutions, like because like security, that people do that, like your password's password 1234, and then you get hacked, and now you create this like 45 character password with no words, no letters, up everything, and you're not technically more secure because you have to write it down on a sticky note because you don't remember it, and all of a sudden you're just as insecure as you were when you had the easy password. And I like look at that as like solutions. When someone tells me to unplug, I'm like, no, because like the stopgap of that, and it gives me anxiety. Like, what am I missing? What notifications aren't I getting? And so it's so much so that I even have now another iPad that is for like the weekends, where I was like, you know what, this one is going to be like, and so it is when I'm with my daughters. But I will say the last thing I would just add is, I've asked my daughters, my oldest is 12, so I have 12, 10, and 8, and I co-parent, so I have 50-50 custody with my kids. I've asked my daughter, like my oldest is, I mean, she's the lifesaver. She's the mom of this house that I run. She's been, since my divorce, has been like the one that takes my youngest daughter to the bathroom. I haven't, like my youngest daughter, I think, was like 3 the last time I took her to the bathroom, because my oldest is like, I gotcha, don't worry. And I told her, I was like, you know what? If there's these moments where you feel I've checked out, or you're having a conversation and you know that I'm worrying about something, tell me. Like, I want you to tell me. And my daughter will tell me. She'll say, Daddy, right now is the time. And I'm like, okay, good. Now I need to go go into airplane mode or whatever I decided that time. That has helped me a little bit, but it's still a struggle. And the guilt, it's guilt on both sides. Guilt for missing a Twitter space, that, you know what, there's a bajillion Twitter spaces. I can miss as many as I want and they're still going to be there, but that anxiety still exists. But then there's also the guilt of like, how am I not being present with my daughters when I only get them every other weekend? And like that, I tell you what, the notification thing was the biggest game changer for me, because I'm very like, my daughters will know, like I walk into the room with the iPad mini, they're like, Dad, can we play Uno? Can we play the games? Because they know if I get interrupted, it's something that is so worth me disrupting it that I can like kind of break that cycle. So hopefully that helps.
Well, I'm going to pull up our random question. If Rich, you want to close this out or anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, it's this conversation is just going to evolve more and more. And I will say one thing that Tom Bilyeu said about his Discord that was fascinating. Whether or not that episode has aired before this one or after, he mentioned when they were doing some gamification in his Discord, and people were like, I've been here all night and like all these things, and it was a red flag. He's just like, our Discord cannot be such that people's lives are not improving, because everything is downstream of no sleep or little sleep. Like everything falls off after that. And I thought that was really interesting, because I've heard not a single creator, NFT project give a shit about how long you're on their Discord or how many Twitter spaces you've been on or all these things. Like, it's actually this strange badge of honor that I do not like, which is why I don't mess with Discord too much, because I know the propensity to kind of be like, well, if I answered these 2 questions, why don't I answer these other 5 or whatever, right? But there is this kind of badge of honor of people who camped out or did whatever to get on this whitelist or that, or tried to get in this raffle or wait for the alpha or to see when who so-and-so was getting on. I mean, dude, even our favorite guy, our North Star, Gary Vee, like there's been times where I've been in that Discord where he was going to come on and he was going to say something. I'm like, dude, it's been 45 minutes and I've been like this, kind of just waiting. My eyes are going nuts because, the feed is insane. And my daughter's like, Daddy, will you play with me? Type thing. And I can't stand that question because it is an indicator of who I am at that moment. So yeah, I mean, like, I think the conversation is going to evolve, but I think it's important, and I think you're on the right track, and I think Heather and I are kind of on the right track as well, in terms of at least like talking about it, and not exacerbating the things that we know to be true about the attention span of Web 2 as it shifts to Web 3. So that's the only thing I would say, Heather, is I it's important that we continue to have conversations like this.
We can't let grind hustle culture blend over from Web 2 to Web 3. I despise it. I refuse to play into it. I will gladly lock arms with you guys and do whatever we can, even to the point where projects that are asking me to advise them on an NFT perspective, one of the questions now in my list is, what is your whitelist and presale rollout? And if it is requiring the amount of hours, the amount of words you use on disc, like you literally are just asking for spam by putting these ridiculous parameters on, what's out there. And then the last part of it too is like, if you're not respecting others' time and their mental health and their ability to be able to prioritize that, I don't even want to be involved with you. But I agree. We've right now is a tipping point of that, because it could very bleed into this ridiculous hustle culture that we know kind of lived in Web 2.
I guarantee you this episode, we're going to get so many freaking comments on that it's going to mean a lot to people because of the transparency on this. But this isn't all. You have an amazing podcast. I love it. Where can people connect with you online and listen to your show?
Yeah, so I'm the personal brand side. I'm iSocialFans with a Z at the end because my last name's Fanzo. It kind of plays nicely. So I'm iSocialFans on every social channel. And the podcast is NFT365. So it's a daily podcast because I apparently wanted to take on something that was ridiculous. And then we're buying an NFT every day as well. So we buy an NFT every day for 365 days, and then we're going to sell them as well. And I'm excited. I'm going to have you guys as a guest on my podcast as well. So we're flipping the script here. And, for me, I'm so glad to be a part of this. Anyone can check it out, NFT365podcast.com. But, more so than anything else, I'm just glad I know that there's others in this community that are, aligned, and together we can hopefully, make an impact on each and every listener on both sides of the fence.
Amen. I'm going to ask this random question from a listener, and then Rich can close us out. This is very serious. This is the part of the show where we really get deep, deep, deep into our feels. This comes from @lady_Z, who wanted to know, if you could be any animal, what would you be and why?
It's a monkey, hands down a monkey. Not because of like we need more bored apes. Like we don't need any more ape projects in the NFT space. But myself and my daughters, the day I was born, my dad gifted me a monkey, and his name is Zippy, and I still have him to this day. He's actually sleeps in my daughter's bed. And so my 3 daughters were born into a terrible towel because I'm from Pittsburgh, and they were born with a monkey in their hand. And for me, it's partially the idea that they can hang around, you have fun, you might throw some poop at some people, but overall you're having a good time and you're a good person around. So yeah, I'm a monkey for sure.